Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're kind of shifting gears, moving past the high-level theory and really getting into the operational nuts and bolts of planning. This is, where it all starts for any military unit with a staff.
That's absolutely right. We're
Yeah.
starting that journey into what's called the military decision-making process. It's a 7-step iterative analytical way of planning.
Okay.
And look, if you get this beginning part wrong,
Yeah.
well, it doesn't matter how brilliant the execution is later,
Mhm.
the mission could be in trouble from the start.
So, foundational stuff. And our main guide here, it's the core doctrine. Field Manual 5.0, Planning and Orders Production, the November 2024 version. That's our bedrock for this discussion.
Got it. So our goal, our mission for this deep dive is pretty clear then. We want to pull out the essential methods, the checklists, the key things you have to produce
Exactly.
to get planning started right. We're talking step 1, receipt of mission, and step 2, mission analysis. Yeah, this is really the intellectual heavy lifting. It sets the stage for success way before anyone actually moves out. And it demands discipline.
The discipline of...
The military decision-making process, like it's laid out in Chapter 5 of Field Manual 5.0, it's designed for thoroughness, for sound judgment, for logic. It's how you get the commander, the staff, the subordinate units.
Everyone on the same page.
Literally working off the same page, yeah. Especially when things are, uncertain or chaotic.
Now, the commander makes the final call, obviously, but the staff, they're the engine room here.
They provide the framework, the quality control. The doctrine points to the chief of staff, or maybe the executive officer, as the main conductor.
Administrator, yeah.
They coordinate all the staff's work, make sure the process stays on track, meets the deadlines, and crucially, they translate what the commander wants, the intent, into actual concrete steps. They're like the central nervous system.
Making sure the plan actually reflects the commander's vision.
Exactly. Because how the operation is conducted, that's the commander's job.
Right.
You can't delegate that. The chief of staff just manages the flow, keeps the whole thing from getting bogged down.
Okay, let's jump in then. Step 1, receipt of mission. The starting gun fires. Now.
Step 1, receipt of mission. Sounds simple, right? You get an order, you start planning. But is it always a formal operation plan or operation order? What actually kicks this off, according to Field Manual 5.0?
Well, most often, yes, it's receiving that formal plan or order from higher headquarters. That signals a new mission, or maybe a big change.
Okay.
But, and this is important, it can also be triggered just by a new task coming directly from the commander.
So maybe during the fight. Or if the situation just changes suddenly.
Exactly. If the commander sees the current plan isn't working anymore or the environment shifts radically, basically, anytime you need a new plan, step 1 fires up.
So you don't necessarily wait for a perfectly formatted document. A clear directive is enough. And the first thing the staff does, it's not actually analyzing that order yet, is it? It's more internal. That's right. The very first reflex action is gathering tools and critically updating their running estimates. This is laid out in Appendix C of Field Manual 5.0.
Running estimates, what are those exactly? Like a status update?
More than that.
Yeah.
Think of it as a continuous assessment for each specific staff area, intelligence, fires, sustainment, protection, and so on. It's dynamic. It tracks.
Like what they know for sure.
Yeah. Current facts, assumptions they're working with, the status of friendly forces, usually down 2 levels, detailed enemy capabilities, what the enemy might do.
Dual considerations, too.
Absolutely. How the local situation impacts their area. And, maybe most importantly, conclusions and recommendations about risk, specifically related to their specialty.
Okay, so let's say I'm the sustainment officer. We get a quick heads up, maybe a fragmentary order, saying the main effort might shift 200 clicks east. I don't wait for the full plan.
No, you can't.
My running estimate should immediately start crunching numbers on fuel, ammo, roads over there, supply levels.
Precisely. You can't afford to waste precious planning time later trying to figure out basic facts. The running estimates need to anticipate.
So if that sustainment officer already knows the roads east are, I don't know, terrible or the population's hostile.
That immediately feeds into the commander's thinking, like within minutes of getting the new mission. Updated running estimates mean you maintain situational understanding, not just rebuild it every planning cycle.
Good.
Okay, that makes sense. And that continuous assessment flows right into maybe the toughest part of receipt of mission, figuring out the time. The initial assessment and allocating time. Yeah, this is where that famous rule comes in. The one you find in Field Manual 50, paragraph 1118. It's pretty non-negotiable.
The 1/3, 2/3 rule?
That's the one. Commanders and their staffs use no more than 1/3 of the total available time before execution for their planning. The other 2/3 gets pushed down to subordinates for their planning and, crucially, preparation.
Wow, that's tight. So if you have, say, 4 days, 96 hours until go time, the whole headquarters planning process, start to finish, has to wrap up in just 32 hours.
That's the rule.
Is that always feasible? I mean, in really fast-moving situations? Or is it more of an ideal?
Look, it's incredibly challenging, no doubt, but it's doctrine for a reason. Preparation, real preparation down at the execution level takes time. That 2/3 is almost sacred.
Why sacred?
Because the subordinate units, the battalions, the companies doing the actual fighting, they need that time for their troop leading procedures. That means detailed recon, moving into position, coordinating with neighbors, and critically, rehearsals.
Rehearsals. Can't skip those.
Trying to execute a complex operation without proper prep and rehearsal. That's just asking for disaster. So the 1/3, 2/3 rule, it forces the headquarters to be incredibly efficient. Ruthless almost.
Forces discipline again. Okay, so to manage that pressure cooker timeline, the staff needs a tool, right? Something to visualize it immediately.
They do. They need to immediately build out what's called the Higher Operational Planning, Enemy, and Weather and Light Data Timeline. It's often just called the HOPEWO timeline. Figure 5.3 in the manual shows it.
HOPPWL, what does that visualize?
It's essential for synchronizing everything. The Chief of Staff uses it to see how their own planning timeline stacks up against higher headquarters milestones when the enemy is expected to be ready. Critical timings like sunrise, sunset, moon phases, maybe even tides.
So it immediately shows you the real constraints. Your planning window isn't just random, it's dictated by like when the enemy might act or the best time for an attack based on light.
Exactly. And based on that visualization, the Chief of Staff approves a detailed staff planning timeline. This thing dictates exactly what products are due, when, and who's responsible.
Like the threat courses of action are due by hour 10, the initial intel collection plan by hour 12. That level of detail.
Precisely that level. It gets the whole headquarters marching to the same beat, aiming to meet that 1/3 deadline.
And all this time pressure, it really drives the need for parallel planning, right? Getting multiple levels planning at once.
Absolutely. You have to maximize parallel planning.
Right.
And the key output from step 1 that enables this is
the warning order. The initial warning order, yes.
Yeah.
Field Manual 5.0, paragraph 526 is crystal clear. Issue it immediately, as soon as possible, even if you don't have all the details yet, what goes in it if it's so early.
It's brief. The general type of mission, who's involved, maybe a rough timeline for planning or movement, but it's enough. Enough for subordinate units to kick off their troop leading procedures right away.
So they can start their own recon, maintenance checks, figuring out their own timelines.
Exactly. The warning order isn't just info, it's the command to start their clocks. It ensures that 2/3 time is actually used effectively, right from the get-go.
So step 1 is really about speed, quick assessment, managing time, and getting the word out fast. Acknowledge the task, update your running estimates, do the time math, push out the warning order. Boom! That discipline start gets you right into the really brain-intensive part, mission analysis.
Okay, mission analysis. This is the absolute cornerstone. If receipt of mission was hitting start, mission analysis is the deep dive, the investigation into the problem itself.
This is where the staff really figures out what hire wants, why they want it, and how all the messy details of the operational environment affect things.
Exactly. It's where you build situational understanding. The doctrine, Appendix A, I think, calls it applying analysis and judgment to information to see the relationships between all this operational and mission variables.
So going beyond just knowing facts to understanding how everything connects.
Right. The inputs are significant here. The higher HQ's plan, the commander's initial thoughts, that first warning order we just talked about.
And the output has to be
an incredibly clear, objective picture of the problem the unit is facing. This ultimately leads to the approved mission statement. And the whole foundation for this understanding, it starts with intelligence.
Right, the intelligence preparation of the operational environment, IPOE. We hear that term all the time. What does it actually mean the staff has to do, specifically about the enemy, terrain, weather, civil stuff?
Okay, IPOE. Field Manual 50, paragraph 530, describes it as this A systematic process. It's designed to produce intelligence assessments focused on how the operational environment impacts operations.
Systematic, meaning structured.
Very structured. It ensures you don't miss critical pieces. It covers enemy, terrain, weather, civil considerations, everything that shapes the battlefield.
It sounds like where we really try to get inside the enemy's head, figure out their next move. It is, definitely. And it follows 4 pretty clear steps. First, define the operational environment. More than just drawing lines on a map. Oh yeah, it's establishing the geographical limits. Sure, the area of influence, area of interest, but it's also identifying all the relevant players. Friendly, enemy, neutral, even say influential bloggers or media outlets, everyone who can affect the mission. It frames the whole problem. Okay, step 1, define the playground. Step 2.
Describe environmental effects on operations. This is where you take raw data like terrain elevation or weather forecast and give it military meaning.
How so?
A key output here is the Modified Combined Obstacle Overlay, or MCOO. This map overlay doesn't just show hills and rivers, it shows viable paths or avenues of approach for both sides. It highlights key terrain, mobility corridors, and critically, it shows where movement is restricted, maybe by steep slopes, dense urban areas, extreme weather.
So the MCO basically tells you, look, you can probably go here, but definitely not there. Or if you try, it's going to be tough.
It starts to limit your options, right?
It absolutely does. It shapes the potential friendly courses of action right from the start. Then step 3 is evaluate the threat.
Going beyond just counting tanks and guns.
Way beyond. You have to analyze how they fight their doctrine, their tactics, their equipment's real capabilities, how they've acted in the past, and, really importantly, what drives them. Political goals, cultural factors. Why do they fight?
Understanding their motivations, not just their gear. Okay, and the final step. This one seems key for planning.
Determine threat, course of actions. Using everything analyzed so far, the intelligence staff develops detailed, plausible enemy plans. What's the enemy most likely to do? What's the most dangerous thing they could do?
And this produces specific things. Yes. Outputs include a high-value target list.
Yeah.
These are things the enemy needs to succeed. And also initial or unrefined event templates. These are things you'll look for later during the operation to figure out which plan the enemy actually chose. Okay, let's zero in on something you mentioned, understanding the threat's center of gravity. Field Manual 5.0, Chapter 2, I believe, talks about this as the source of their power, their strength, their will to act. Why is this so hard to nail down, especially today?
It's tough because, our default is often to look for something physical, a specific unit headquarters, a key bridge, supply hub.
Something you can target.
Exactly. But in a lot of modern conflicts, especially messy hybrid ones, the center of gravity might be, well, not physical at all. It could be the political backing from another country, or the public's belief in a certain narrative, or maybe the loyalty of a specific ethnic group.
So if we misidentify it, say we go after their logistics, but their real strength is controlling the local media, then you waste resources, effort, maybe even lives, attacking something that doesn't actually cripple their ability or their will to fight. You had a decisive point, maybe, but not the decisive point linked to the center of gravity.
So the whole IPOE process is geared towards avoiding that huge mistake. Find the real center of gravity. Figure out its critical vulnerabilities.
And that understanding of vulnerabilities is what should drive how we develop our own plans, our own courses of action. #tag identifying and categorizing tasks.
Okay, so you frame the environment, you understand the threat. Now the staff has to look at what the higher-ups actually told them to do, right? Analyzing the order itself.
Precisely. This involves meticulously combing through the higher headquarters plan in order to identify every single thing the unit is required to do. And the doctrine makes us categorize these tasks into 3 types.
Right. This helps clarify the mission. What's the first type?
First, you have specified tasks. These are the easy ones. They're explicitly assigned, usually right there in black and white in paragraph 2, the mission paragraph, or paragraph 3 execution of the higher order.
Like seize Hill 405 or establish blocking positions here by this time.
Exactly. The must-do items that are clearly spelled out.
Okay, but then comes the tricky part, right? The real brain work for the staff. Implied tasks.
Yes. This is where analysis really happens. Implied tasks are things that must get done to accomplish the specified tasks or the overall mission. But, well, nobody actually wrote them down in the order.
So how do you figure them out?
You have to derive them.
Yeah.
You use your understanding of doctrine, your professional knowledge. You analyze the specific situation, the terrain, the enemy. It's connecting the dots based on the mission. Field Manual 5.0, paragraph 536 covers this.
Can you give an example? How would different snap sections find implied tasks?
Sure. Let's say the specified task is conduct an air assault into Area X. Okay, immediately, tasks start multiplying.
Implied ones.
Yeah. The fires officer implies the task, suppress enemy air defenses around the landing zones. The engineers or protection guys imply, clear obstacles and secure the landing zone. The intel officer implies, provide continuous surveillance of the objective. Logistics implies, plan for emergency resupply and casualty evacuation.
So the staff is basically taking the main task, air assault, defense, whatever, and applying the doctrinal checklist for that kind of operation against the specific situation.
That's a great way to put it. They're filling in the blanks, the necessary steps the higher order didn't explicitly state. Okay, so you have this long list now. Specified tasks plus all the implied ones you figured out. What's the final category? The final and most critical step is identifying the essential tasks. From that whole combined list, the staff and ultimately the commander selects the one or maybe two tasks that absolutely must be accomplished for the overall mission to succeed.
The absolute core of the mission.
That's right. These become the what in the unit's own mission statement. If you fail the essential task, you fail the mission, period. #tag analyzing resources, constraints, and facts.
Okay, tasks defined, specified, implied, essential. Now the staff has to look inward, right? Check their own capabilities.
Exactly. Now it's about analyzing resources, understanding limitations, and being really clear about what's known versus what's assumed. So, first up, assets and shortfalls. What does that involve? You review your current task organization, who actually works for you right now. You look at command and support relationships, who you support, who supports you, and you assess the real capabilities of all friendly forces involved.
Not just your own unit.
No. Everyone contributing. Joint forces, maybe coalition partners, interagency folks, even civilian organizations sometimes. This is where you start that initial relative combat power assessment. Do we actually have enough stuff, the right kind of stuff, to do this mission compared to the enemy?
And that initial assessment is critical. If you realize early on, hey, we're way outnumbered here, or we don't have the right engineers for this.
You have to flag that immediately. Either request more resources from higher, or, just as importantly, tell the commander, boss, this task might be too big with what we have. It's an early reality check.
Okay, resources assessed, then comes constraints. What are those?
Constraints are things you cannot do, or things you must do. They're limitations placed on you, either by higher command or just by the situation itself. Think rules of engagement, maybe resource limits like don't use more than X amount of artillery rounds, political boundaries you can't cross, or maybe timing constraints.
Like don't start the attack before Sierra 600, or avoid hitting the mosque unless you're taking direct fire from it.
Exactly. These are directives that restrict your freedom of action. They ensure your plan fits into the bigger picture and often reflect legal or policy requirements. They definitely narrow down your options before you even start brainstorming courses of action.
Got it. Resources, constraints. Then comes the really tricky balancing act. Facts versus assumptions.
Yeah, this is crucial. A fact, according to Field Manual 50, paragraph 542, is verifiable information. You know it's true. An assumption, paragraph 543, is something you accept as true, even though you don't have proof, simply because you needed to keep planning. You have a gap in knowledge, and you have to bridge it somehow to move forward.
That sounds risky. I mean, what if your assumption is just plain wrong, like assuming the main bridge will be intact and the enemy blows it?
It is absolutely risky. That's why the doctrine is very strict about assumptions.
Yeah.
They have to be logical, realistic, and seem highly likely.
Yeah.
And critically, Field Manual 50 warns against having too many assumptions. The more you have, the shakier your plan becomes.
So how do you manage that risk?
Well, first, you explicitly list them out. No hidden assumptions. Everyone knows what they are. Second, and this is key, you actively work to turn assumptions into facts. You direct your intelligence collection assets, reconnaissance teams, drones, whatever, specifically to confirm or deny those assumptions. Is the bridge really intact? Is that enemy unit actually where we think it is? Validating assumptions is a primary driver for the initial information collection plan we'll talk about later. #, mission variables, mission, enemy, terrain, and weather, troops and support available, time available, civil considerations, and informational considerations.
Okay, we touched on the big picture with operational variables earlier, political, economic, social, etc. Now, during mission analysis, the staff needs to filter all that down to what's immediately relevant for this specific mission, right? Using the mission variables. That's exactly right. The mission variables provide the framework for detailed analysis at the tactical and operational level. They are mission, enemy, terrain and weather, Troops and support available, time available, civil considerations, and the newer edition, informational considerations. Often remembered by the acronym METTTC, METTTCI.
Every staff section uses these variables as lenses to analyze the higher order and the situation. It ensures a comprehensive look at everything directly impacting the unit. Appendix A in the manual really breaks these down. Let's spend a bit more time on a couple of those that seem particularly complex in modern operations. Civil considerations and that newer A for informational considerations. Good idea. Civil considerations are huge. The doctrine defines them as how man-made infrastructure, civilian groups, and just the general population affect our operations. We use the memory aid ASACOP to break this down systematically.
A second scope.
Right. Areas, structures, things like political boundaries, ethnic neighborhoods, key civilian zones, structures, critical buildings or facilities, bridges, power plants, hospitals, but also culturally significant sites like mosques or historical landmarks.
Yeah.
You have to weigh the impact of using or damaging them. Okay. C is capabilities.
Right.
What can the local authorities actually do? Can they provide basic services, water, power, police, healthcare? This is vital, especially in stability operations. Then O is for organizations.
Non-military groups, like NGOs, local leaders, maybe even criminal gangs.
Exactly. Any group that has influence. You need to understand their goals, who they are, whether they help or hinder. Then P is for people.
The general population, what are you assessing there?
Their basic demographics, but also their attitudes towards us, towards the enemy, towards their own government. Are they supportive, neutral, hostile? Who are the key communicators, the influencers?
I think the doctrine also mentions considering things like gender perspective here within all the scope. How does that practically play out?
It's incredibly practical. Different cultures have different roles in access for men, women, children, the elderly. Ignoring this means you might miss vital intelligence because, say, only women have access to certain community information. Or your aid distribution might fail because you didn't account for how resources are shared within families. Female engagement teams, for example, are often crucial for accessing parts of the population male soldiers can't reach effectively. It's about understanding the whole population.
Makes sense. And the last letter, E.
E is for events, significant happenings in the civilian calendar. Think elections, major religious holidays, harvest seasons, market days, even big local festivals.
How do those affect military plans?
They can be huge constraints or sometimes opportunities. Planning an attack during a major religious festival. Probably a bad idea due to crowds, sensitivities, and potential backlash. Knowing about a local market day might help predict traffic patterns or population density. The staff has to factor these in.
Wow. The level of detail needed for ASCOPE is pretty demanding. You really have to think through the ripple effects of military actions on the civilian side.
Absolutely. Which leads perfectly into that informational considerations. This was more formally added to recognize just how central information is now.
So not just propaganda, but the whole information environment.
Right. It's about how information itself, true, false, manipulated, affects the cognitive domain. How does it influence enemy decisions, friendly decisions, civilian perceptions? It looks at our information capabilities, the enemies, the infrastructure like cell networks and internet, and the psychological aspects.
How does this actually link back to the other variables? Can you give an example? Sure. Think about time available. The informational consideration forces you to ask, how long does it take for our deception story to actually sink in and affect the enemy commander's thinking? Some informational effects take way longer than moving troops. Or look at enemy. The eye makes the intel guys analyze the enemy's use of social media, their cyber capabilities, our own vulnerabilities to their propaganda. It pushes commanders to think about the informational impact of every action. What message does blowing up that bridge send to the local population, even if it's militarily necessary? Sure. Think about time available. The informational consideration forces you to ask. #, hand initial risk assessment, and commander's critical information requirements, CCIRs. Okay, so as we're wrapping up all this analysis, the staff needs to consolidate two really critical things: the initial assessment of risk and the key information gaps. Right, starting the formal initial risk assessment.
Yeah. Based on everything learned so far, the staff identifies the main hazards. What are the biggest risks to accomplishing the mission? What are the biggest risks to the safety of our own forces? This is where risk management officially begins for this operation, as per Field Manual 50, paragraph 546.
Getting a first look at the potential costs and dangers.
Exactly, and providing the commander a sense of what might need to be risked. And to help manage that risk, and just the general uncertainty, the commander defines their commander's critical information requirements. or CCIRs.
CCIRs, these are the things the commander absolutely needs to know.
Needs to know right now to make key decisions or successfully plan the next steps. Field Manual 50, paragraph 548, stresses they have to be specific, time-sensitive, and tied directly to the current situation. They're not just nice-to-knows.
And they drive the whole intelligence collection effort, don't they? Focusing limited recon assets on the biggest unknowns.
Precisely. And the intelligence-specific part of the CCIR list is called the Priority Intelligence Requirements, or PIRs. These are the critical gaps in knowledge specifically about the enemy, or maybe terrain, weather, or civil situation. Things the commander has to know about the adversary or the environment to make a timely decision, like where's the enemy's reserve located? Or will that river be fordable by heavy vehicles by D-Day? Answering the PIRs is the top priority for the intel collectors.
Okay, so the PIRs flow directly from the analysis.
And they immediately drive the development of the Initial Information Collection Plan, covered in paragraph 551. This plan tasks specific assets, scouts, drones, patrols, electronic warfare units to go out and find the answers to those PIRs, and also to start validating or refuting those critical assumptions we talked about earlier.
So mission analysis isn't just thinking, it's generating action to reduce uncertainty before you commit to a plan.
That's the goal. It's intense, yes, but that intellectual rigor is supposed to build a plan on solid ground, not on guesswork.
Okay, so all that intense brain work in step 2, mission analysis, has to produce some concrete outputs, right? Things that get approved and allow the staff to move on to actually developing options. The most obvious one is probably the proposed mission statement, hashtag the proposed mission statement.
Absolutely. The mission statement is the distillation of everything. Field Manual 50, paragraph 559 says it has to be short, concise, a sentence, or maybe a brief paragraph. It describes the unit's essential task and its purpose.
And the key test is?
Can a soldier, maybe a squad leader, 2 levels down, remember it and repeat it easily? If not, it's probably too complicated.
And it has to contain those 5 key elements, right? Let's recap those quickly, right? The 5 W's. 1, who, which unit is executing. 2, what, the essential task, usually starting with an action verb like seize, defend, secure. This comes directly from that essential task identified earlier. 3, when, the timing, either a specific time or linked to an event. 4, where, the location and objective and area of operations. 5, why. The purpose, this is crucial. Why are we doing this task? How does it connect to the higher commander's goal? Getting the what and the why perfectly synced seems like the real art here. The what is the action, but the why gives it meaning, context. It justifies the whole effort.
It's arguably the most important part, and the entire statement, especially the why, must nest with the mission and intent of the next higher headquarters, and ideally the one above that too. It has to clearly contribute to their success.
And the commander signs off on the final wording.
Yes, typically during the mission analysis briefing, that approved mission statement becomes the definitive task for the unit. Hashtag developing evaluation criteria.
Okay, mission statement nailed down. Another key product, maybe less visible but really important for later, is evaluation criteria. Why do these need to be set up now during mission analysis if they're not actually used until way later, in Step 5, course of action comparison?
That timing is critical for objectivity. Field Manual 50, paragraph 563, is clear on this. If you wait until after you've developed your potential plans, your courses of action, well, there's a human tendency to subconsciously create criteria that favor the plan you already like best.
So setting them up before you even know the specific options prevents bias.
Exactly. It establishes objective, measurable standards up front for comparing different plans later. It turns, I just feel like Plan A is better, into Plan A scores higher against these pre-approved criteria for, say, speed, simplicity, and risk.
Makes sense. How do you make sure they're actually measurable and objective? The doctrine gives a structure for good criteria. Table 5.2 lists 5 parts. The doctrine gives a structure for good criteria. Table 5.2 lists 5 parts. 1. A short title like casualties or tempo. The doctrine gives a structure for good criteria. Table 5.2 lists 5 parts. 2. A clear definition of what you're measuring. The doctrine gives a structure for good criteria. Table 5.2 lists 5 parts. 3. A unit of measure like number of people, hours, kilometers, percentage. The doctrine gives a structure for good criteria. Table 5.2 lists 5 parts. 4. A benchmark, which is the standard or desired value, e.g., enemy crossing a phase line Bravo delayed by at least 12 hours. The doctrine gives a structure for good criteria. Table 5.2 lists 5 parts. And a formula basically stating if more is better or less is better. For casualties, less is better. For tempo achieved, maybe more distance covered is better. That formula part seems key. So for a criterion like complexity, measured by, say, number of task organization changes, the formula would be less is better.
Precisely. And then, importantly, These criteria are often weighted based on the commander's priorities given in the planning guidance. If the commander has emphasized force protection above all else, then criteria related to risk or casualties will get a heavier weight during the comparison step.
So the final comparison truly reflects what the commander values most.
That's the intent. Hashtag the commander's intent and initial planning guidance. Okay, this leads us right to the commander's big input during mission analysis. The commander's intent and the initial planning guidance. This sounds like the real steering mechanism for the staff as they head into developing actual plans. It absolutely is. The commander's intent is incredibly powerful. Field Manual 50, paragraph 169, defines it as the clear, concise expression of the operation's purpose and the desired military end state.
Purpose and end state. Key elements.
Key elements. It has to be simple, easily understood by everyone, and pushed out widely. Its most critical function, to empower subordinates to use their initiative.
How so?
Because plans rarely survive contact with the enemy, right? Things go wrong. If a subordinate leader, say a company commander, loses contact with higher, or their planned route is blocked, they don't just freeze. They look back at the commander's intent, the why we're doing this, the desired outcome, and they adapt their actions to still achieve that purpose, even if it's in a different way.
Ah, it provides the guardrails for decentralized execution. They know the goal, even if the path changes.
That's the core idea. And just like the mission statement, the intent must nest. The commander has to ensure their purpose and end state directly support what their boss and their boss's boss are trying to achieve. Unity of effort depends on it.
Okay, that's the intent. How does the planning guidance relate to it?
The planning guidance fleshes out the intent. It gives more detail on the commander's visualization, including the broad operational approach, the overall concept for how the mission will be accomplished. Think of it as the commander painting a clearer picture of how they see the operation unfolding. Field Manual 50, paragraphs 568 and 476 cover this.
So this is where the commander starts putting some specific constraints or direction on the staff's upcoming work, telling them what not to do or what to focus on.
Exactly. The guidance gives broad direction, maybe preferred lines of effort, phasing concepts, specific things to avoid, or key priorities. It's often broken down by the warfighting functions, as you see in Table 5.3.
Can you give some examples?
Sure. Under movement and maneuver, the commander might say, only develop courses of action that involve bypassing strong point X, or maybe focus on maneuver in the north. Under fires, it might be prioritize counter-battery fire or limit collateral damage effects. Under sustainment, maybe, all plans must ensure units have 3 days of supply internally. Critically, it includes risk acceptance guidance, how much risk to the force is acceptable versus risk to the mission.
So this guidance stops the staff from spinning their wheels, developing plans the commander would just shoot down later anyway because they're too risky or too slow or don't fit the overall concept.
Precisely. It channels the staff's creativity in the right direction, making the course of action development process much more efficient and aligned with the commander's thinking. Hashtag final output and transition. Okay, so all this work, the IPOE, task analysis, resource checks, developing the intent and guidance, it all comes together in the mission analysis briefing.
This is the big check-in with the commander.
It is. It's the formal point where the staff presents their findings. Here's the situation as we see it. Here's what we think the enemy will do. Here are the specified, implied, and essential tasks. Here are our resource issues. Here are the key constraints and assumptions.
And crucially.
And here's our proposed mission statement, our initial list of commander's critical information requirements, and the evaluation criteria we propose using later. Field Manual 50, paragraph 566, lays out the typical contents.
In the commander's role in this briefing
is to listen, question, and then provide decisions. They approve or modify that mission statement. They refine their commander's intent. They approve the initial CCIRs, which really kicks the intelligence collection to high gear. And they give that final, refined planning guidance we just discussed.
So once that mission statement is approved, the staff is good to go. That's the green light. They've formally defined the problem. They understand the resources and constraints. They have the commander's direction. They've achieved enough situational understanding to transition into step 3, course of action development. They're ready to start figuring out how to accomplish the mission. The sheer amount of information processed, from the deep dive into IPOE to the nuances of ASCOPE, it really highlights the intellectual rigor required here. It's foundational. Hashtag and tag outro. Digging into receipt of mission and mission analysis like this really drives home a core point. Successful operations don't just happen. They're built on the back of incredibly thorough, disciplined planning right from the start.
Absolutely. That analysis is the foundation. If you just look back at the key products from these first two steps alone, the initial warning order getting people moving, the approved mission statement defining the task, the commander's intent and guidance setting the direction, the initial CCIRs focusing intel, the objective evaluation criteria.
Those are the non-negotiable outputs, aren't they?
They really are.
Mm-hmm.
They mark the transition from just reacting to a higher order to proactively shaping your own operation with a clear purpose.
And Field Manual 5.0 was pretty blunt about the dangers of trying to shortcut this, right? Trying to skip the hard analysis because you're short on time.
Yeah, it calls that out as a major pitfall. You simply can't develop good solutions, good courses of action, if you haven't truly grappled with and understood the complexities of the problem first.
Okay, so mission analysis helps the staff define the desired end state, the ends, in operational art terms. And it gives the commander the best possible picture of the resources available, the means.
That's a great way to frame it. So maybe a final thought for you, our listeners, to chew on, thinking about that operational art framework. Ends, ways, means. The commander's final planning guidance, given at the end of mission analysis, sets the boundaries. How does that guidance on risk, on phasing, on priorities, how does it actively constrain, or maybe even more interestingly, how does it liberate the staff when they move into the next step and start defining the ways, the actual courses of action, to connect those ends with those means?
Yeah, how does that guidance channel creativity? Good question. The framework's built, the rules are set. Now comes the creative part, generating the options. Sounds like a perfect topic for our next deep dive. Looking forward to it. Until then, remember, be thorough, know the details, and trust the process laid out in the doctrine.
We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.